Welcome to everyone tuning in to join us for the March edition of the Samuel Lawrence Foundation's First Fridays series. And happy Women's Month to you all. My name is Grace Chalmers, and I'm the Program Manager here at SLF. The Samuel Lawrence Foundation advances impactful programs at the intersection of science, arts, and education in order to find solutions to our planet's greatest challenges, from nuclear safety all the way through to climate change. We host our First Fridays shows every month to showcase the incredible people, ideas, and projects that are advancing that mission and making a positive difference in the world. For today's edition of First Fridays, we've assembled a phenomenal panel of women who are truly shaping the future. I'm going to turn this over to our moderator, the CEO of Brooklyn Story Lab, Lance Gould, to introduce our wonderful panel of speakers. Lance, over to you.
Thank you, Grace, and welcome to all. We're living in a precarious era, one defined in the last half-decade by a polycrisis, most concerning of which has been the three Cs: COVID, climate, and conflict. And much of the worst elements of these crises have been exacerbated by male leadership. As the global climate gets increasingly worse, it's worth noting that the international climate conferences that could have more impact are dominated by men, like the UN COP conferences, where the heads of state of almost 200 countries are signatories to consequential treaties, and the number of them that are women are in the single digits. And as noted in an op-ed by Margot Wallström, Sweden's former Minister of Foreign Affairs, there were 130 international peace agreements signed between 1990 and 2014, and women were signatories to just 13 of those. Meanwhile, on the other side of the coin, the most compelling leadership in the handling of all of these crises has come from women. New Zealand's Jacinda Ardern won much praise throughout the world for her handling of the COVID emergency in her country. And women leadership in the climate space has been brilliant, notably by Barbados' Prime Minister Mia Mottley and former Ireland President Mary Robinson. For this episode of the Samuel Lawrence Foundation's First Fridays video podcast, we have assembled a panel of women leaders because they have answers and solutions as to how to move forward in a new way, with an emphasis on sensible solutions and not the grandstanding of so many current leaders. We'll hear from panelists who have a focus on educating the next generation of women, making sure they have a seat at the table, which will be better for our global economy, our global society, and for our planet. Women will lead the way. So joining us today, we have Anne Wadsworth, founder and executive director of Girls Education Collaborative, which has a focus on Tanzania. Jano Salakangas, one of two women from Finland who co-founded Mission Impact Academy with an eye on leveling the playing field for women in the jobs of the future, such as in AI. Melissa Sims, a lawyer in Illinois who is using the legal system to hold the fossil fuel industry's worst offenders accountable. And Nairaza Hoto, one of the officers leading Akashinga, Zimbabwe's all-woman ranger unit, and Akashinga's biodiversity officer. Welcome to all. Each of our guests today has a unique vision and approach to navigating some of the biggest challenges we're facing as a planet and is embracing the ideals of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, a blueprint for making sure that no one on the planet is left behind by 2030. First, we'd love to hear a little more about each of the initiatives with which each panelist is involved, and then learn more about some granular ideas that each has come across in their work. So first question will be for Anne. Anne, you founded Girls Education Collaborative in Buffalo, New York, but your focus is on Tanzania. Tell us about how this project got off the ground and what is so important about making sure that girls and young women receive an education.
Thanks, Lance, and greetings to everybody. Really happy to be here as we launch the Month of the Woman. A great start to it. So the problem in the world that Girls Education Collaborative is trying to solve is that there are millions, approximately 130 million girls around the world who are out of school simply because of their gender. And there are many reasons for this. There are quite a scale and scope of barriers that keep girls out of school that range from the very harsh and extreme, which would include female genital cutting and forced early marriage, to the unequal burden that girls often have in the household, collecting firewood or water compared to boys in their household, because boys are given preference for their education. So there's a variety of reasons why girls are barred from their education, but the majority of them are matters of inequity and based solely on their gender. So that is the problem in the world that we're trying to solve. And we go about that by supporting and investing in and being allies to the community born and community led and community based solutions that are centered around the girl child and helping children gain agency and to stay in school and complete 12 years of a quality secondary education. The reason this is so important is first and foremost, it is a basic issue of human rights that girls are denied the freedom and choice in life and barred from their education and all that an education can tee up for them later in life simply because of their gender. So, first and foremost, it is an issue of human rights. But in addition to that, when you do educate a girl who eventually becomes a woman, it actually has even a greater impact on that girl's community, her nation, and our world. So when you see societies where girls are educated, uh, they contribute more to uh, revenue development. So a country's, gross national product is higher. There's more productivity. There are uh, fewer children. The children who are born have better health outcomes, have a greater chance of education. It is a pathway, actually, out of generational poverty. And that has a ripple effect, uh, as I say, beyond their community, into their nation, into our world. And lastly, I'll just cite I think we can also, there's a very clear line that can be drawn between how a country treats and educates its girls and women and its level of radicalization. And so that's certainly something that touches all of us in our world. So, in a nutshell, those are the reasons why it's important and the problem that we're trying to solve.
Thank you, Anne. And while you were speaking, we saw some really beautiful photos from some of the projects that you're running in Tanzania or helping to run in Tanzania, supporting in Tanzania. We mentioned the SDGs earlier and how the SDGs are also interconnected, and promoting gender equality, which is SDG 5, can have an impact on climate, can have an impact on economic outcome, things of that nature. You have another program, another initiative that Girls Education Collaborative has helped launch, which also involves the Katenga School, which is the school in northwest rural Tanzania that you really first started with. And this program is called Garden for the Future. Tell us about how this initiative, how it tackles so many of the UN SDGs simultaneously as well.
Right. So our first engagement with the community was with the Katenga Girls Secondary School in Tanzania, as you've mentioned, and that's where our deepest partnership and most long-lasting partnership is. And on this site it's a residential secondary school in a very underserved and remote area where cultural traditions, destructive cultural traditions, are still very, very strong. And this Garden for the Future is a regenerative agriculture project based on the principles of permaculture. And the idea is to bring together um, these new ways of doing agriculture, which are actually based in sort of ancient and indigenous traditions, but it's moving away from the colonial methodologies that were introduced, which involved monocropping and heavy use of pesticides and fertilizers, and back to multi-cropping in a way that restores the land, restores topsoil, restores deforestation, and leads to climate resiliency and climate change mitigation. But the idea is to bring it together with girls at this age and level of their education, because women play a really supersized role in agriculture across the continent of Africa. And so it's a pilot, it's a sandbox, uh, and where we can watch the outcomes of from at minimal girls taking these strategies home to their own families and their own home family gardens to as a way to ripple out the impact of restoring the land and also producing crops that are better for the body and nutrition, to at best inspiring the next generation of educated girls coming up in the leadership ranks. Right now, they just, the feeling is that agriculture is what old people do and what uneducated people do. And the continent really, really needs people who are inspired by how uh, certain types of agriculture can change our world and save our world. So we're hoping that this pilot project will inspire some of these talented young future leaders to think about agri-entrepreneurism and regenerative agriculture as a pathway for them.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Anna. That's a great segue to talk to Jana, talking about great economic opportunities for women in the future and trying to develop them with the skills that they need to do so. So, Jana, thank you for joining us today, first of all. And tell us about Mission Impact Academy, MIA, and how MIA is helping to open new doors for women in high paying and important jobs in the tech sector, specifically the emerging technologies affiliated with AI.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having us and me here. I'm honored and excited to be on this panel together with you all. My name is Janna Salakangas. I'm co-founder of MIA, Mission Impact Academy, and MIA is a global AI academy empowering forward-thinking companies and non-technical women through education in AI. Our goal is really to upskill 1 million non-technical women worldwide and unlock 100,000 jobs, accelerating the advancement of AI skills and driving inclusive innovation in the AI space. Today, we have a learning network of more than 1,000 women globally from over 65 different countries learning daily about AI. We run interactive, fun, upskilling challenges and AI challenges, and we want to make AI accessible for all the non-technicals ones, me included, by the way. I'm the best example. I used to be a non-technical founder only a few years ago. So it's all about continuous learning and getting out there, learning by doing, and this is what we believe in as MIA. We do run different upskilling programs as well for companies to send their internal workforce and the women to be upskilled inside our programs. Really, the future of work is being created now, and the biggest question we always get whether AI will take over my job, and my answer is no. But a person using AI will have incredible career opportunities, and this is what we want to empower these women to understand. Let's start to learn the skills of the future, AI now, because you will have incredible career opportunities by understanding and using these. And we have great testimonials, and I'm happy to share a bit later about those as well. Those new jobs, new roles that we have achieved, or these women have got after going through our programs. But we really want to make sure that women are at the forefront of the AI revolution, and we do believe that the winning combination of the future is human plus AI. So by focusing on relevant AI education and upskilling for the non-technical workforce, we can really create well-paid, inclusive jobs that will include both AI and the human intelligence. They're both equally needed. Uh,
I love your point about how we shouldn't be afraid of AI. We should embrace it. But let me point out a statistic here. I'm not sure that our viewers realize just how disproportionately devastating this global pandemic was on women in the workforce.
yeah.
While women held less than 40% of all global jobs before the pandemic, they suffered 54% of pandemic-driven job losses. Some VIP European women leaders put an op-ed together, and they noted at the time that at least, quote, an entire generation of girls was robbed of the opportunity before they were even born to stand on equal economic footing as male counterparts. So your thoughts on that, Jana?
Yeah, shocking, obviously, what's happening. But let me give you a little bit of hope. And we really started Mia's work during the pandemic as well. And what we were able to validate with only few weeks upskilling programs, micro credential programs, we were able to validate these women's skills, and they were able to get internal promotions, start new companies, and get new roles. So we believe that the future is really about micro learning, and the traditional learning methods are having hard times to keep up with the fast-paced information. So with only few weeks with upskilling the relevant skills, and we need to make sure that we work together with organizations to understand what are the future skills required for the future jobs, and make sure that we upskill these women to meet those needs. So there is really hope there, because only with short upskilling programs we can see the incredible impact already. We have great examples of Simone, 60 years old, becoming a CEO of a Swiss bank after going through our programs, because she was able to showcase her AI skills. This is my AI portfolio. This is what I can do. And she was hired. We have Mari Carr, who is a mother of 8. She got a new job just after a 6 weeks upskilling program. And the fact that she was a part of our global AI leadership program at that point was a critical factor for at the final round of the interviews, because you can really show what is important to show now. It's all about the continuous learning, and this is what the employers are looking at the moment. So there is hope there as well. That is something I wanted to point out.
That's wonderful. We're going to talk to Melissa now. Melissa, you're bravely taking on some of the biggest names in the fossil fuel industry: ExxonMobil, Shell, BP, Chevron, by filing a lawsuit against them, pointing out that they're responsible for producing 40% of all global greenhouse gas emissions since 1965. And as a New York Times profile of you pointed out, you're also holding them accountable for, quote, colluding to deceive the public about the disastrous consequences of their actions. Tell us about your legal strategy here.
Thanks for having me on today. I'd be happy to talk about it. So when we look at their collusion, so they had two forms of collusion. First of all, their collusion started in the 50s when they earnestly studied carbon in the atmosphere. Greenhouse gas the greenhouse effect has been coined as far back as the 1800s. So we knew that carbon in the atmosphere was going to affect the climate. But these fossil fuel companies actually colluded together to study that in earnest. They even funded the Keeling curve. So the Keeling curve is what we rely on today that detects carbon in the atmosphere. And it's a needle way on top of Mauna Loa Observatory in Hawaii that looks at the increase of carbon in the atmosphere. So the companies actually colluded together to decide what was going to happen with more carbon in the atmosphere and how it was going to affect their equipment. So they actually were looking at modifying their oceanic equipment against the rise of sea level that they knew was going to happen. So in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, they accumulated a lot of studies that were not available to the general public. And in 1979, which is very fascinating, an intern at Exxon named Steve Kinsley, Knisley, was asked to put all those studies together and come up with a white paper, and he did so. And the fascinating part of this white paper is it shows with pinpoint accuracy how much carbon is in the atmosphere today. So you can look at the graph from ExxonMobil and you can compare it to the Keeling curve, and it's exactly accurate as to what's going on today. So they knew with pinpoint accuracy what the effect of the carbon in the atmosphere was going to be. But instead of gathering this information and deciding to take the crossroads towards global health, no, they decided to take the crossroad towards actual profits in their pocket. In 1998, the companies, through their representatives, got together through the American Petroleum Institute and others and sat down at a table. In March of 1998, they come up with the Victory Memo. And the Victory Memo is a division of labor among who was going to be the promoters, what they were going to say, and how they were going to change the world into believing that climate change wasn't real when they knew that it was. So they had particularized individual knowledge as to what the effect of climate change was going to be, and that it was going to disproportionately affect people throughout the globe. And instead of doing something about it, they chose, and I think Shell coined it in their memo, in a 1998 memo called TINA, there is no alternative. And that was an economic term of art coined by Margaret Thatcher that meant we can't go back. So we couldn't go back either. So they chose that crossroads after having this knowledge, and they decided to sell their consumer products. And they colluded together to deceive the world into believing climate change was not a real existential threat.
That is so upsetting, and I'm so glad that you're on the case. But speaking of the collusion, interestingly, your lawsuit is the first to do two things, as I understand it. It is the first to use the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, also known as the RICO Act, which is often used to go after mobsters and organized crime, as a legal strategy. And it's also the first, your lawsuit is the first to sue for damages for a specific weather event, in this case, Maria, the punishing hurricane that pummeled Puerto Rico in 2017. Can you elaborate on that and let us know if that's accurate and how you're pursuing that?
So when we filed this, everybody acted like RICO was something that we created. No, RICO is filed all the time. We did it in the opioid litigation. Our firm was involved in the opioid litigation. If you look through all of the racketeering cases that have been filed, you see they used it in the emission cheat scandals with Volkswagen and Ford and Bosch. They used it against State Farm for colluding with a sitting Illinois Supreme Court justice to overturn a verdict. In fact, the fossil fuel industry uses it against their protesters, right? So it's really used all the time, right? And it's actually
So that was inaccurate, what I said, just to be clear.
No, it's the first time it was used in the climate change plaintiffs portfolio of cases. Okay.
Thank you for clarifying.
But it's used all the time.
Okay.
It really, I don't want anybody to think that
Wait, did we lose Maria? Oh, there she is. Okay. Yeah, please continue. Sorry.
So, so then what happened was you look at what is racketeering. So all racketeering is, and it means someone outside your own organization colluded with each other to perpetuate a fraud, okay, or one of the other enumerated 18 offenses, predicate offenses in the Racketeering Act. And so what's usually used is the mail fraud and wire fraud. And what that means is you use the internet, the US mail, or money to perpetuate a fraud. And what they did is they let the world into believe that climate change was not real when they knew privately that it was. So they used the US mail and wire to perpetuate that fraud. And we have thousands of examples that we put in our 300-page racketeering complaint.
Wow, that is just as a non-legal person, it sounds brilliant, and I'm sure legal people would agree. But I'm so glad you're on the case, and we'll come back to you and hear more about that in a few minutes. But Nairaz, I want to come to you. First of all, thank you so much for taking time off of your patrol to join us for this broadcast. And we understand there are maybe some connectivity issues in where you are in Zimbabwe, and we know it's evening time in your time zone. So we really appreciate your being here with us today.
Thank you so much.
You are the biodiversity officer and a sergeant leader of the Akashinga Rangers, a nonprofit that has one of the largest portfolios of wilderness under protection by a nonprofit in southern and eastern Africa. Tell us about Akashinga, from what the word means in the local Shona language to your specific role and your leadership in conservation.
Thank you so much for this golden opportunity to be part of the show. I'm so grateful. Akashinga is a Shona word that means the brave ones. It means the brave ones. So it is a local Shona word that means someone who is strong, someone who is dedicated. I don't know how best can I explain on it, but it really means the brave one. So Akashinga was started in 2009, but the initiative of employing all female rangers was implemented in 2017. That's when I joined Akashinga and I successfully passed the ranger training and also progressed with my career from being a ranger to become a sergeant, and also recently being promoted to be a biodiversity officer. And Akashinga is promoting a lot of financial freedom to a lot of women from the local community.
That's wonderful. And so Akashinga, the word comes from the Shona word meaning the brave ones, and you joined in 2017. Akashinga's focus is not solely on the women in the unit, but also on the animals that you're protecting. Tell us about that mission and specifically what you do in the field, how you do it, and why that matters.
Yeah, Akashinga is focusing on plant-based approach. Thus, female rangers, Akashinga female rangers, are vegans, meaning that we believe in not killing the animals. We are protecting the animals. We have dedicated our lives to protect the animals. So we think that to us it is meaningful and worthwhile to just protect and let the nature control itself than to protect. Then we bring the buffalo into the pot. So we are based on the plant-based approach, focusing on planting more trees, planting more vegetables, and bringing vegetables into the pot. So Akashinga, through the plant-based approach, it is also working aligned with the fight of the climate change.
And how and tell us about how Akashinga is working on a climate change level.
Right now, I'm very proud that I'm now working as a biodiversity officer. Last year, we started to introduce an indigenous tree planting nursery in Urungwe district. That's we are trying to uh, plant more or restore the vegetation, restore the ecosystem to the areas that have been facing deforestation from the local communities. We arrest some people who do deforestation. So I, as the biodiversity officer, we go into the schools and do some conservation clubs, speaking about the goodness of conservation, and also with this program of planting more trees, it is also working hard to climate change.
Well, I really hope you get a chance after this to talk with Anne from Girls Education Collaborative because of their Garden for the Future in Tanzania. I'm sure there's a lot of information that your two organizations can share there about preservation and food security and things of that nature and climate resilience. Thanks to all of you for sharing more about your organizations. Now let's hear more about some of the ideas that have emerged from your work. So Jana, you and your co-founder, Tarja Stevens, have both joined the advisory board of Women of the Future, an impact-driven initiative dedicated to highlighting and applauding the leading women changemakers in emerging tech. Tell us more about this important project.
Yes, for sure. And we're actually the co-founders of this important project as
Oh,
well. And
okay.
how it started was funny because we were interviewed in an innovation blockchain book because there was obviously not enough women in tech and AI and Web3 and blockchain at that time. And we were one of the few women who were invited and interviewed to this book. And during this interview, this interviewer asked us like, would you have any other women that you could recommend that we could interview as well? And we were like, oh my gosh, yes, we have like hundreds of them. So we figured out like, let's do a book about these women shining a light on their incredible work, because this is so important. The more examples we have, the more women's voices we have out there, the more we can feel included in the AI and the tech revolution as well. So the more we can shine a light on these stories. We just published the second Women of the Future book out. The first was all about Web3 and the metaverse. Now it's all about emerging tech and AI. And I just want to highlight that there are incredible women and pioneers out there, and we just need to shine a light on them even more than we're doing now. And that is what the project is all about. So it's an inspirational project.
Can you give us one example of a particular woman who stands out from the latest book?
Oh, there's so many. Can I highlight all of them maybe? Actually, a few of our change makers as well who used to be non-technical, but now they're working on incredible tech projects and leading their AI innovations and there's so many. You will have to. I'll send you all the books so
Okay.
you can select your favorite ones from there.
Excellent. Nairadzo, I've read that when Akashinga first began, it was hard for local communities to accept women in ranger positions. How did that feel for you and the other women in the unit? And were you able to channel those feelings as motivation for your work?
Yes, at first, when I started joining Akashinga, most of the men from the local community were mocking at us, were discouraging us, were draining energy from us, discouraging us that we cannot make it because they just think that only men can be rangers, since it was a male-dominated space for some decades ago. But for that we're doing to us motivated us and give us power to prove them wrong, that uh, we have no limitations, we have no boundaries, we can do it, and we have proved that we women, we can break the boundaries, we women, we can change the world, we women, we can do something, we can bring a difference by the arrests we have made since we have started and the successes we have made since we have started as Akashinga Rangers. We have proved that female rangers can be more powerful and can bring a big difference to the world. So the actions that were being done by the men from the local community gives us power and motivated us to break the boundaries. And
That
today we are a living testimonies.
That's amazing. And speaking of the differences, can you tell us how Akashinga is making a difference on how women are perceived, as well as how the unit is having is demonstrating its protection of species. I'll just throw out a couple of quick stats that I read. Some astounding statistics show that wildlife has increased 400% since Akashinga came into existence, and there's been a 90% downturn in poaching. Tell us about those numbers and just the difference that Akashinga is making.
Yeah, when we started to operate as Akashinga Rangers, the area we started to operate in had a history of 8,000 elephants that have been poached before the formation of Akashinga. And
8,000.
yes, 8,000 for the past 16 years before the formation of Akashinga. And it proved so because when we started to do our patrols, we used to find a few animals along the patrol. But as time goes, when we were doing the patrols, the animals started to gain to come in, and they were feeling protected because the area also was a hunting area before we started to operate in. So whenever the animals see us, maybe they were thinking that the rangers wanted to kill us. So at first they were running away from us, but maybe they started to sense that these guys, they are not after killing us, but they are there to protect us. So they started to feel relaxed, and the number is getting increased. And for sure, since we started from the wildlife sightings of, that have been recorded on the patrols, it have increased to 399%, almost a 400% increase. And for the poaching rate, we have reduced it to 90%, and we have also rated it on the snares we were removing on the in the bush that they were being laid by the poachers. It's almost 700 snares that we have removed from the concession since we started, and right now the number have decreased. So it means that we have reduced the rate of population by a greater effort.
Amazing. And you said 700 snares. Is the poaching that's going on there, is it mainly subsistence poaching, or is it commercial large scale poaching?
Yeah, it's both subsistence and commercial large scale poaching. So for the subsistence are those who use the snails, and for the commercials are the ones who target on the elephants.
Got it. Okay, thank you. And we'll come back to you briefly. Just to want to get another question to Melissa here. Melissa, this is not the first time that you've sued Exxon. Tell us about the impact that you think you're having by going after multinationals, and what have been the driving motivations for you to do this work?
Yeah, so before I joined Milberg is an international class action law firm, but before I joined Milberg, I was an attorney in a small town, general practice of law with my boss who was in his 80s. So the two of us represented municipalities in addition to everything else. We did wills, trusts, divorces, all of that. And one of the towns we represented was the village of Depew. And what I've learned from my work now is that, and I wish someone had opened my eyes up to this sooner. And part of me doing these webinars and talking to people is so that you can open up your eyes too. Most of the people who are the victims of pollution are communities of color, okay, throughout the world, right? And they're the ones who are disproportionately affected also by climate change. But one of the towns we represented was the village of Depew, and we have a very high undocumented worker population in that town. Exxon, CBS, and Viacom had made film for the film industry, and in the 80s, when everything went digital, they left town, and we had bright blue mud puddles all over town. We had one of the highest MS rate in the country, multiple sclerosis, and nobody cared. Nobody cared. Nobody tried to get them to clean it up sooner. We had blue mud puddles from the nickel, cadmium, chromium. Okay. And if this was in a white community, it would be cleaned up, you know? And that was kind of like an eye opener for me. And I start at my firm with my former boss. We started every day in prayer. And I am a devout Catholic, and I was not raised to bully people. Okay. And I was the one who went to court every Tuesday and Friday and took people to court for mundane ordinance violations, like flicking a cigarette butt, or not picking up your cat feces, dog feces, not cutting your weeds, not having your trailer on a permanent foundation. Those are things I went to court with every Tuesday and Friday of good people, and finding them. And I was at a board meeting in August of '06. And they're just exasperated why this Superfund site had taken so long to even study. I mean, they were still in the studying phase, right? Meanwhile, there's bright blue mud puddles in town. And I remember the mayor leaned over to me and he said, Missy, what can we do? And I said, we're going to sue him. And he said, can we? I said, I don't know. So I went home that night and I said, I don't know. I went home that night and I took a run. And that's where I get alone with the Holy Spirit. And I just said, all I said is help me help them. And he doesn't want big, long prayers. He just wants something from your heart. And he said, find them. And I thought, I find people every day for dog poop in their yard, tall weeds, broken windows. Why can't I find Exxon, CBS, and Viacom? So I call a friend of mine who does work for the big corporations, environmental work for them. And I said, would I look stupid if I did this? And she said, nobody's ever tried it before. Why not? So me and my 90-year-old boss took Exxon to traffic court, and we fined them for littering for something they did 60 years ago. Because in Illinois, there's no statute of limitations against municipalities. It's called nullum tempus occurret regi. And it means literally no time runs against the king. So I had all this municipal.
And was that a successful lawsuit against?
Well, they dismissed us. We went to Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals. And for the first time, though, the Seventh Circuit ruled that there was no preemption. Everyone had assumed there was preemption. Everyone had assumed that a unit of local government could not take on big corporations for something that was going on, like a nuisance. And it really turned the nuisance world on its head, because after the Seventh Circuit ruled, I had all these big plaintiff firms say, how did you do that? Like, what happened there? Like, how did you get rid of preemption? And so then it was after that that I was asked to sue Shell and ConocoPhillips for benzene pollution in Southern Illinois in a little town called Roxana. I used the same ordinance scheme, and we fined them for benzene. Again, we won a motion to dismiss on that, settled that case. And then the big plaintiff law firm saw me and said, hey, can you help out with the opioid litigation? Because I knew a lot about municipal law. So really what drives me is my faith, and I think my sense of community, which is really part of being a Catholic. Is being Catholic is not necessarily a religion, it's a community.
Mm-hmm.
And you're taught every night before I went to bed, my mother would say, what did you do to help other people today? Right? So it's part of ingrained in your sinus rhythm as to finding ways to right wrongs. And that's part of what I do now is I look to see who is affected by this. And 9 times out of 10, it's a community of color. And so then I try to find innovative ways to get around certain laws that are on the books to try to get them some compensation or just get it cleaned up.
That's amazing. And I want to come back to you shortly because I want to hear more about Puerto Rico because of the great work you're doing down there. But speaking of local communities, and one of the strategies that is so important to your approach is backing local leaders on the ground where you offer support, and you're not coming in to rescue them. Tell us more about your Ally Funders Alliance approach with Girls Education Collaborative. This is for Anne. There we go.
Thanks, Lance. Well, you're right. So just a little bit more about our approach. When we launched about 12 years ago, it was a little bit more typical for a Western-based organization who wanted to help affect community change to go be the ones to start a school or an orphanage or a program, and of course get the community's cooperation, but basically the Western organization would be the decision maker and kind of lead the ideation and problem solving. And so when we launched, as I say, about a dozen years ago, we launched with really the core value that local leaders and people of the community know their communities in a way that we could never know, and that there are change makers really fighting to bring equity to their communities, to bring dignified lifestyles, help their community emerge out of poverty, better health outcomes, et cetera, et cetera. And that they have the ideas on how to do that and the buy-in from the community in a way that we could never have to really bring meaningful, authentic, and long-lasting solutions. What they really struggle with is access to resource and networks and getting noticed, especially in these, truly underserved and marginalized areas, which tend to be rural areas out of the more popular realms where NGOs typically work. So, in addition to trying to solve this world problem I mentioned earlier about girls being barred from their educations, we also think about how can we accelerate this work? How can we catalyze activity? How can we catalyze investment? How can we 130 million is a really big number and we're not going to do it by ourselves. So how can we accelerate change? And we're doing that in a way through the Ally Funder Alliance, which is a funders collaborative of bringing together a deliberately small, intentionally small group of like-minded funders uh, in who so like-minded funders who really believe in this issue of helping the world's girls access quality education. And then GEC acts as a portal or a bridge to early stage girl centered community work. Right now, we're doing this in Tanzania. And those organizations are called ally organizations. And this is all within the umbrella of the Ally Funder Alliance. And what we're trying to do is one, get unrestricted dollars to these change makers. So they do get grants that range from $5,000 to $20,000 multi-year unrestricted, because we're putting faith and trust in the leaders that they know best how to spend their money. And then also offering allyship, which can be thought partnership, capacity training, network building, introductions to other funders, and really trying to put take away some of the burdens that smaller organizations often face of jumping through hoops to get funding and disproportionate reporting, et cetera, et cetera. And while our Ally Funder Alliance may only touch a relatively small group of organizations and a small group of funders, we're kicking the tires on the model also as to, is this something that could be replicated by others globally, uh, regardless of the issue, regardless of the sector, regardless of the geography, where there's a GEC that can act as the bridge or the portal.
It's Girls Education Collaborative for the viewers.
Thank you. Girls Education Collaborative that can bundle philanthropic dollars behind us in the peanut gallery, but then be the mediator on how to best get those dollars into the community level in a really efficient and effective way to really create impact on the ground.
It seems like it has incredible scaling possibilities.
We think so. We think so because we're really trying to keep down overhead. We're trying to keep down bureaucracy, be deliberately lean and mean, because we think that that's the way to get these dollars to doers, because these needs have to be met now. And the pandemic was, you referenced the pandemic earlier. It's been a huge setback to adolescent girls.
Oh, yes. And you're really shaking things up on a philanthropic level, and shaking up the status quo is not easy work, and it can be dangerous too. This question is for all panelists. Nyaradzo, for example, speaking about danger, tell us about some of the dangers you face in your work, not just from the wild animals you deal with, but also from the armed poachers that you encounter. And you mentioned that you've made a lot of arrests. Tell us about some of the work in the field. Wait, I think you might be on mute, Nyaradzo.
Thank you so much. We Female Rangers, we are doing our operations in a different approach to the way the male rangers were doing, because I can understand that the male rangers were only believing in gunshots when it comes to arrest. But we can arrest, while will be like doing like sort of discussions, like sort of stories. We we do the, what can I say, like mothers. we de-escalate tension in the community. So by going into the community, we can have much information, especially the armed poachers, the commercial poachers. We usually arrest them while they're in their homestead, because what they do is, if they kill an elephant, they don't just started to want to sell the ivory or the tusk at that real time. They're gonna just even take 1 year while still keeping the ivory, try to find the best buyer of that ivory. So usually when they have the ivory, we hit their homestead during what we call raids during the nights. So we raid their homestead during the nights while least they are asleep. So we work in the groups, then we raid the homestead, usually like around 1 a.m. or 12 a.m. while least everyone is asleep, not even being suspicious that we're gonna be arrested. Then we raid the homestead and we start to do the searchings, and after we find something, we do the arrest. So the way we
And
do.
have you ever had any resistance in any of these arrest scenarios? Like, tell us about some of the. From what I understand, you a lot of times they're very there's a very calm scenario, and there's not a lot of tension. But tell me if I'm wrong about that.
Yeah, the challenge was just when we started the operation as female rangers, because male were feeling like being challenged, that we are now like overtaking, or we are now overturning the wheel, that they are being excluded from the field as rangers. But because we just keep on pushing and showing our effort, and also showing that we are strong and we are dedicated to the job, they started to understand that they've done an offense, so they deserve to be arrested. And also we work with some other stakeholders around the country, like the Zimbabwe National Parks Authorities, the Zimbabwe Police. Then we work together as a team of conservationists.
I see. And Melissa, speaking about shaking things up, your work is making some of the world's largest companies sweat that they could face judgments that could cost them billions of dollars. Tell us how you navigate those concerns.
It's not a concern for me how they navigate. I'm just, representing our clients and trying to get some sort of abatement or reimbursement for the costs that they've expended. So, how they pay for it is, beyond my ability to control.
But I apologize. I probably didn't articulate that as well as I could have. Like, tell me about some of the challenges you face in taking on these billion-dollar companies, and how they can come back at you. Like, how are you navigating that part of the strategy?
Well, I mean, some of the companies have gone after lawyers for, it was Steve Donziger, if you're aware of the Chevron
Yes,
case, they went after him for racketeering.
Chevron did, right?
Yeah, Chevron did, and they've gone after some protesters for racketeering and criminal charges. We're not doing anything criminal. We want to pursue everything in court in the open. We want to get at the information that they have. What the information that's going to be very important in our case is not necessarily climate change, because they admit now climate change is real. When I run across people who don't believe in climate change, the first thing I say back to them is say, well, Exxon agrees that it's real. Because they all do.
Yeah.
Like now they all agree, oh yeah, it's real. It's just our fault, right? It's all of our fault, right? They didn't
Right.
give us any alternative, but when they could have done so. But so I say, well, all of the CEOs of the fossil fuel industry admits that climate change is real and is a threat. So to me, though, what's going to be very important, and it's not really challenging, is finding out who is funding these climate deniers. Who is actually giving them the money? Where is this dark money coming from that we can trace to these climate deniers? Because if you're in the business of selling a consumer product, which oil and gas is, if you're in the business of selling a consumer product, you cannot use a promoter to say something that is untrue. And so is there a material funding of those promoters? And if we look at the victory memo, that's what the victory memo said, is how they were going to get funders to go after trying to undermine what they knew was real about climate change. And then also, who ordered all that? And is it still going on? Because we still see, outliers saying, oh, climate change isn't real, the earth is still flat, things like that. But who's funding that?
Yeah.
And so that's what's really going to be at the core of our case, is who funded this climate denial campaign, and is it still being funded while they're admitting that climate change is real?
I have a lot of thoughts about that, but I'll share them off camera.
I'm open to them.
I'll have more questions for our panelists in a bit. But first, Grace, do we have any questions from the audience? And let me remind the audience that if you are watching and you have questions, please submit them to us shortly.
Yes, I'm hoping we haven't stunned our audience into like amazed silence on the other end of the screen here, like I've been sitting here off camera just smiling at all of your amazing contributions here. So thank you all for joining us. We've actually had a couple of questions about resources that you all can share to read, follow, keep up with your work on women's leadership and women's empowerment in general, because there were so many amazing things you've all said here today. How can people who are watching stay up to date and stay informed?
Let me add that one note, which is that at the end of this broadcast, and when this is when this is published next week, we'll have a lot of those resources on the Samuel Lawrence website. So, but please, panelists, please add to that and anything else that we can learn about resources for information about your projects.
Well, I can add quickly here about just Mia and the AI resources, because I think this is what we are all about, really creating a one-stop destination to find all of the latest and greatest in AI and the tech revolution, because the information is so fast. Critical thinking is one of the most important skills going forward. So this is a great question. Where do we find those right sources, and who do we trust in the age of AI? So that is what we are trying to create, a safe space for women to come together to learn and get really the latest resources in AI, but also connect with each other. And we have been talking about the power of community, which is so important for us women to come together, create that safe and inclusive environment for us all to belong in a place, learn together, and get the best resources available. So I'm inviting everybody to Mission Impact Academy to see what we have going on there. But there are incredible things. I'm using LinkedIn a lot, and I'm connecting with amazing women leaders around the world on LinkedIn. So I'm a big believer in the power of social networks and LinkedIn, so to say, today.
And the floor is open for everybody else, but in the meantime, let me just note, this isn't intended to just be a Q&A, but also an opportunity for our panelists to ask questions of each other. So while you're thinking about the first question, feel free to ask each other questions too.
I had a question for Jana. What kind of baseline education for women to start your program? Like what level of what would be the entry level of baseline education before they got into one of your programs for upskilling?
It can be anything, really. Mostly of our students are non-technical, and anything from above 18 years old to, we have, I think, 75 or 78 years old. So it's super diverse, the expertise, what we see. So professional women tend to find us and really be interested about AI, because obviously this is something that they need to do in their workforce. So rather than the youth, so we have more of professional talent joining our programs, but it's super diverse. And what I believe, with the power of AI in the future, it will be about personalized, hyper-personalized learning. So we can use AI as well in the future to create more equitable learning plans in a way, because the AI could read you, and based on your skills and what you have learned so far and your profiles, AI could be able to suggest the right things for you to learn going forward, these short micro lessons. But it's a super diverse community. So any requirement is just openness and willingness to learn. And then we are interviewing companies as well, because we need to work together with companies to understand their hiring practices and also their AI implementation, so we can best match our programs to meet those needs, because our goal is really to make sure that these women, we unlock their economic empowerment after going through the upskilling programs. but no expert experience needed at all actually to join. You just need to be willing to start. We believe in learning by doing quite a lot, so get your hands dirty and start prompting and experimenting together with us. So it's a safe space to come together and just ask. There are no stupid questions at all.
It's so important what you're doing, Jana, just to offer this new pathway for women, specifically after the pandemic. But even if the pandemic had not occurred, just trying to level the playing field and to bring these opportunities for upskilling and reimagining careers after wanting to change paths.
Yeah, exactly. And make it fun. It can be learning can be so much fun. We do metaverse field trips and we do our graduation parties are always in the metaverse and great gatherings together. So it's about coming together and learning the skills of the future together. And obviously networking. That's the best part of it as well.
I have another question for everybody, but I'm going to pause just in case there's any questions from the audience, or if you guys have more questions for each other. But if you don't, just if you do, let me know. But otherwise, I'll move on.
Actually, can I interject with a personal question, Les?
Absolutely.
Thank you. I actually grew up going to a girls' high school. I've been surrounded by powerful and really inspiring women my whole life. So I personally feel very strongly about girls' education and inspiring young women. Have any of you personally talked to younger women since you've started your work and had any interesting or inspiring stories talking to young women who could really look up to you guys? What's your experience been?
I talk to young women a lot, and it's been amazing watching sometimes these people who I meet as girls become young adolescents and then turn into women. Actually, one of the pictures that came up earlier while I was doing my earlier comments were two graduates of the Katanga Girls Secondary School who are now beginning their university careers and during the break of school are volunteers for Girls Education Collaborative. And they have incredible visions for their communities and are really excited about becoming change makers. So it's really been wonderful to see girls not only get their educations, but one of the things I really see um, is this dedication, this commitment to coming. There you go. That's the picture. Naomi and Naima. And this was actually in Katanga, Tanzania, about 2 weeks ago. And they were getting some tech training for their volunteer positions. But what I really see is this commitment not only to their professional educations, but to giving back to their communities rather than abandoning their communities. And they really want to be change agents. And they're really committed to becoming change agents. And one of my greatest moments was we have a tagline that we did when we did our very first website, and it's "There's nothing a girl can't do."
Mm-hmm.
And the first time that I ever heard a girl say that back to me in the course of conversation, she like turned to me and she was like, "Well, BB, there's nothing a girl can't do." I was like, "Okay, like I can go home now."
And just to note, Anne, just to give some context to the audience, what you're doing in Katanga is so incredible. I mean, this is in northwest rural Tanzania, where a lot of these girls would not be allowed to go to school at all. They're discouraged from going to school. You mentioned earlier in the broadcast how they have a disproportionate number of household chores, and there are other cultural barricades. But to see two alumni who've gone through the program heading on to university must be very satisfying for you.
It is, and actually, 100% of the girls have continued on in their education who graduate in
100%. Let's say that again. 100%.
right in a region where the average might be around 10%, and it is an area with where it's hard for us to wrap our hands around it, but the destructive traditions prevail: the female genital mutilation, bartering into marriage for cows, and so it's really tough. But girls want their education, and we are seeing a transformation in the families and the surrounding communities. And this last January, it was a record-breaking class being admitted.
The largest ever, right?
The largest ever, right?
Amazing.
And I think I think that is a demonstration of the changing mindsets.
Well, we're coming up on time here. We can certainly go a little over, but let me do a
Right.
speed round here. Let's ask each panelist, what gives you the most hope for a woman-led future? Nayaraza, why don't we start with you?
Thank you so much. I can say that for the planet's health and well-being to keep going, it depends on the choices we make today. So we Akashinga Rangers have already made the choices to change the world, to change the environment, to keep the wildlife and nature. So there is no limitation, there's no boundary for everyone, even if it is a boy or it is a girl, because it is our responsibility to fight and for the conservation to keep going. And also the action is happening on the ground, not just on the ground, but also in the sea and also in the air. So if we just keep our hands together, and we can make a difference and change the world. And as women, we can keep on changing the game.
Amazing. How about you, Melissa?
Actually, may I interrupt for a moment while we have Nayareza speaking? We just got
Sure.
a question in from our audience.
Oh, sure.
Someone was inspired by your comment, Nayarazo, about the link between vegan lifestyle and plant-based living and impacting climate change. Are there any things that you can tell our audience about that in particular, especially because they were so inspired by your comment?
Yeah, on vegan diet, I can say you need more land. You need to clear more land to keep like livestock or poultry, but you don't need more land like to plant a lot of vegetables or a piece of garden or even some trees. So for the vegan diet, it supports the climate change since it doesn't need more terrestrial lands to be cleared so that we can sustain our living. So we believe that if we turn our diet into vegan, I think we can support the nature at all cost.
Such a great connection.
Thank
Melissa,
you.
let me remind you of the question that, and thank you, Grace, for that great question from the audience, and thank you, audience, as well. Melissa, what gives you most hope for a women-led future?
Uh, I think we'll care more.
Yeah.
I think we'll care more about the world and about each other. I see the effects of climate change and I see who it's affecting and the devastating number of people who die every year from climate change. And I think the more women become in charge and have positions of leadership, we're going to reach out to those people who are disproportionately affected and we're going to help them. And I believe that that's what we need to do is we may not be able to stop climate change. We may not be able um, to end it, but we can help each other. And I think that's where women are going to be instrumental.
That's a very well taken point. And in the annual UN climate conference known as COP, the next one's going to be in Azerbaijan.
Mhm.
And when that was first announced, the Azerbaijani president of that conference selected a panel of advisors. I think it was 28. I think it was 14 people, and not one of them was a woman. There
Wow.
was such blowback that they ended up adding a few more. But to your point, we need more. We need more women leadership in that space. Anne, how about you?
Yeah, I think it's people like your guest Nayaradzo here, who are just local change agents who are carving out new pathways and demonstrating. I loved what you said about the mama approach, and that challenges and problems can be solved with a feminine approach and lens and be just as effective, if not more effective. And just that you're representing, you know, the, being a community agent, change agent, and taking it forward. And so I'm meeting a lot of incredible community based leaders like yourself. And I'm just so inspired by what they are doing and what they're accomplishing. So you go, girl.
Thank you.
And Yana, how about you?
I'm
What gives you
really
most hope?
I'm really echoing with Anne as well, but the women-led future is all about leading with empathy and leading with example. And even though we talk about AI and the importance of AI and these hard skills, but there are some things that technology won't ever take over. Our emotional intelligence, our human skills, which are our power skills, emotional intelligence. And this is where we are so good as being women. So let's just continue in harnessing those skills and continue leading with empathy. And the more we have women in leading positions, the more we have inclusive innovation and the more innovation will happen for sure. So the time is now.
Amazing. All of you, I'm so grateful. Thank you all four panelists for this fascinating conversation and for sharing your perspectives here today. You all are doing such phenomenal work with consequences that seem bound to have more impact on our future than ever before. That concludes our program today. To rewatch this podcast or to see a transcript, go to the Samuel Lawrence Foundation website in the coming days, some point next week. The website is samuellawrencefoundation.org. Thank you so much to Girls Education Collaborative, Mission Impact Academy, Sims Law Offices, and Akashinga for their participation in today's event. We'll also have links to all four of those organizations on the website there next week, as well as to Blue Planet Alliance, one of the supporting partners. To learn more about the critical work all participating parties are doing to advance women's rights and other sustainable initiatives, and to stay informed about upcoming events and important initiatives, sign up for the newsletters of the Samuel Lawrence Foundation and Brooklyn Story Lab. It's brooklynstorylab.net. Also, make sure you join us for the next Samuel Lawrence Foundation First Friday series in April. Thank you and goodbye.